Good day, students. You are welcome to the study session 2 of ARC 323 class, Cost Accounting. Today, we shall be looking at the topic Cost Classification, Codification, and Behavioral Aspect of Costing. So in this session, you should be able to know about the classification of costs, also the various pattern of cost behavior, and the term codification is also very important in this section. So as introduction is to say that we should be able to know the different cost implication in an organization, that it is important for any individual to know how he or she is spending his or her resources. So we'll be talking about the meaning and the classification of costs and be able to identify the method of cost classification. So let's now look at classification of cost. So in cost accounting, cost accounting is concerned with the controlling of operations or products and services. So cost control can be possible subject to first introducing cost classification into the business activities. So according to the Chartered Institute of Management Accounting, they defined cost classification as the arrangement of costs into logical groups with respect to their nature being whether they are fixed, variable, or they are value adding. Then function, whether it is a production cost, selling cost, advertising cost, as the case may be, or use in the business of the entity of the organization. So we can classify costs into different forms. Let's look at the classification of cost according to the element of the cost. Cost can be classified by element. So there are three basic elements of cost. There are material, labor, and expenses. Okay? Material, labor, expenses. Like I said in the first section, expenses are costs other than material and labor that can be attributable to an activity or item. So we can classify costs according to labor cost, material cost, and expenses. That's one cost classification. And we have given examples of material cost, raw material, component, work in progress. We've also given examples of labor cost, wages, rates, and we've given examples of also expenses as the case may be. Number 2 is to classify cost according to the nature of the cost. So in doing that, we have two types. We have direct cost and indirect cost, which we have also briefly discussed in the first session. So we have direct cost, we have indirect cost. So direct cost can also be direct material cost, direct labor cost, and direct expenses. We can also have indirect material cost, indirect labor cost, and indirect expenses. So we can, number 3, the third classification is to classify costs according to the functions. Okay, so according to the functions they perform in organization. So we can have production overhead or production cost, selling overhead or selling overhead, marketing overhead, distribution overhead, administrative overhead, research and development overhead, depending on the item or unit or function in the organization. From the name, you know that selling overhead are the expenses incurred in securing orders in the cost of marketing a product. So in the cost of selling a product. So marketing overhead will include cost, connected costs, cost of advertising, and cost of PR, public relations, and so on and so forth. So these are the, for example, research and development overhead are the costs incurred in looking for information to generate new ideas, to do research, find out and develop new products. Those costs are there. So the next thing is for us to now look at the cost classification according to cost behavior. Okay, so costs may be classified according to the way they behave in relation to the activity level into the following. Number 1, fixed cost. Number 2, variable cost. Number 3 is semi-variable or semi-fixed, or what we call mixed cost. They will now have what is called stepped fixed cost. So what is a fixed cost? Okay, a fixed cost, these are costs that do not vary with changes in activity level. That is, they are static, they don't change. That is, no matter how the level of activities changes, they don't change. So example of fixed cost, salary for example, it is fixed. So whether you produce 20 quantity or you produce 2 million quantities, you still collect your monthly salary. So fixed cost is also cost of building, furnitures. The cost of furniture will always be fixed. Okay, so these are costs that doesn't change with activity level. Okay, on the other hand, we have what is called variable costs. Variable costs are cost that varies, that changes in direct proportion to changes in activity level. So the cost of raw material, for example, because the more you produce, the more raw material you buy. Direct wages too, the more you produce, the more hours workers will work to pay wages. Direct expenses too is also part of variable cost. Then we have semi-variable cost or semi-fixed cost, or what we call mixed cost. These are costs which contain both elements of fixed and variable elements. That is, for a given range of level of activities, the cost may remain constant, and beyond the relevant range, cost may then be varied. Okay, for example, cost of electricity, for example, of telephone or water, may be fixed for a constant period, after which it increases as the case may be. Then we have the stepped fixed cost. The stepped fixed cost. These are costs which are fixed for a given range of activity, but which changes discretely for ranges of activities beyond the given ranges. So also have classification of cost as per product cost or period cost. You can read that in your material. We also have classification of cost into controllable cost and uncontrollable cost. So controllable costs are costs within the influence of or responsibility of the manager, while uncontrollable cost is outside and is not within the influence of the manager. We also have classification according to relevant or irrelevant costs. Relevant costs are costs that are future costs and revenue that can be altered at any given decision, while irrelevant costs are costs that will not be affected by a given decision, especially past costs. So example of relevant costs are future costs, opportunity costs, incremental costs, avoidable costs. Okay, an example of irrelevant costs are past costs, sunk costs, unavoidable costs is irrelevant. It's not variable. Then fixed costs, except for incremental fixed costs. So other classification are avoidable costs, non-avoidable costs, normal costs, abnormal costs, sunk costs, opportunity costs. That's the cost or the benefits or the value or benefit forgone or sacrifice in favor of an alternative courses of action. So that is the opportunity cost. We also have incremental cost or revenue. You have marginal cost or revenue, future cost, replacement cost, conversion cost, attributable cost, policy cost, development cost, pre-production cost, committed cost, value added cost, predetermined cost, standard cost, budgeted cost, actual cost. And please, you can read those up in your materials. And the cost objectives and possible cost classifications. The cost objectives will include the cost for stock valuation, for example, for planning and decision making, which we have discussed in earlier section. So the next item is to look at cost codification. Cost classification is not complete until we code or until codes are applied to costs that are classified for the purpose of simplicity. So code basically is a brief, accurate reference designed to assist classification of items by facilitating entry, collation, analysis. So characteristics of good coding systems include: it must be simple, it must be flexible, it must be easy. Okay, each item should be with a fixed coding length, and it must be also concise. The method of codification, we have the mnemonic method, which we use symbols, okay, to abbreviations and symbols. We have the decimal method, where we use decimal, okay, figures and decimal to identify a primary group or a secondary group, a material labor or expenses overhead, to identify either cost center, cost unit, or profit centers. So we can read those up in the note. And to also say that we should also talk about a cost center. So a cost center can be defined as production or service location, function, activity or item of equipment for which costs are accumulated is a cost center. So it can be used to describe a location, a person or item or group of these in relation to which costs are ascertained. For example, Olabisi Onabanjo can have ODL cost. So every cost incurred in the ODL center is grouped into that. So cost centers could be broadly classified as production cost centers or service cost centers. So cost units, according to the CIMA, the Chartered Institute of Management Accounting, they defined a cost unit as a unit of product or service in relation to which costs are ascertained. So a cost unit is a quantitative unit of a product or service in relation to which a cost can be ascertained. So for example, a bag of maize, a bag of rice, a barrel of beer, a carton of mineral, and so on and so forth are example of cost units. And a profit center, which is the last one here, is the center which not only incur costs but also generates income. It's a profit center. So we've been able to look at, as a summary in this section, the cost classification defined. We'll be able to define it and also look at the various classification of costs. And we've also looked at other classifications like avoidable costs, normal costs, sunk costs, and the rest. And also look at codification and the essence of codifying, and the method, mnemonic method and the decimal method. These are the things we've been able to do during this session. So thank you very much for listening to this session and viewing this section. I hope you've been able to gain so much watching this. Till I meet you again in the next section. Thank you for watching. God bless you and bye.